Hello, my name is Wil Riva, and today I'm going to be teaching you a little bit of opening theory. Now, what opening theory is that chess is split into three parts: the opening, the middle game, and the end game. The opening is the first couple moves in the game where you're going to see development of pieces, and most openings kind of have like a main idea that you're going for. The middle game is when the pieces start to get developed, and now you start to see more of a plan on what both white and black want to do. And then the end game is when the position simplifies to where the board has not that many pieces left, and either side will probably try and promote a pawn or find a good mate. Now, today I'm going to be talking about d4 theory. And so when you play d4, a bit of context, it was quite popular, or it wasn't popular uh, during the 15th century, 16th century, or even the 18th century. It was played though. It's just e4 was a lot more common back then, since e4 is a more open and a little bit more aggressive opening, which is what people liked back then. But during the 1800s, then we started to see a bit of a popularity spike for d4, since this opening is considered to be a bit more long term and strategic. Now, when you play d4, black has a lot of responses. The most common you're going to see is knight f6 and d5. Knight f6 is considered to be a bit hyper modern. What that means is that the idea is that black is allowing you to kind of take control of the center with hopes of fighting back later. But d5 is considered to be more classical, and that means that you're fighting for the center. And if you're unaware, these four squares are considered to be the center, and the importance of the center is when you control it, you basically control the attack, and you're able to just kind of suffocate your opponent. So it's a good advantage of having the center. So today, though, there's a lot of variations, so we're going to solely focus on the Queen's Gambit declined. Now, what that is when black plays d5, and now we're going to play c4. Now, what we're doing here is gambiting a pawn. The idea is that if black takes, we can play e4 or e3 or knight c3, and all of these moves are basically taking control of the center, and we're sacrificing a pawn to do that. But black doesn't have to take here. You know, obviously they can want to keep on controlling the center, so you may see something like the Slav as well. But today we're going to be focusing on the Queen's Gambit declined. This is called the declined variation. So when black plays the declined, the move white should play here is knight f3. You can play, or excuse me, knight c3. You can play other stuff, but this is just my personal favorite move, developing a knight into the game. So there's a lot of variations here. Most common one you're going to see is knight f6. And when you see knight f6, you can do a lot of things here. Most common response is knight f3. Here, there's a lot of moves black can play once again. All of them are quite popular. We're going to focus on bishop e7 first. Now, there's two moves white can play here. You can go bishop f4. In the main line, you're almost always going to see black castle. Then you're going to play e3, and there's a couple moves you can see here. The first one is c6, just defending that pawn, getting a nice pawn structure. If you see that, just go bishop d3, plan on developing, and you're going to be in a pretty good shape. But you could also see knight b d7. And if you see that, again, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to go bishop d3. We're going to probably plan on castling, developing our pieces, and we're going to be in a really nice shape here. Now, black can play c5. And if you see this, I would recommend best move is d takes c5. Almost always you're going to see bishop takes c5. And then you can play a couple moves. You can play queen c2. This isn't my favorite move. Instead, I would rather take the pawn here, because after pawn takes, E takes isn't the greatest move because after bishop e2, you just simply have a better position, a little better control of development, and a little bit of control in the center. So white's better here just by simply playing bishop e2. But if knight captures, then I would recommend knight captures again. Then you'll see e takes d5, and then bishop d3, and this is really nice in my opinion. White still has a really good position, has good development, probably going to castle and get yourself in a pretty good middle game. But that's if they play c5. But they could also play something like b6. Now b6 is considered probably to be the best move here. The idea is to probably just, develop the bishop or something like that. And so what you want to do when you see b6 is you want to take the pawn with c takes c5. Now, if black plays e takes c5, this isn't a good move simply because bishop d3 and white's position is much better here. So it's much better to take with the knight. After knight takes, we're going to again take the knight here. And you don't want to play e takes c5 here either, because again, bishop d3 and white's just simply better, as similar to before. Now, best move here is to take with the queen. This does look like a free pawn here, but don't take it, because playing bishop takes c7, black actually gets a lot of counterplay with bishop b4 check. Only good move is to block the check with knight d2, and then knight c6, and all of a sudden black is starting to get some really quick development and some really good counterplay. And so we're definitely not going to want to have black have that counterplay. So what to play instead would just simply be like bishop e2 or bishop d3. Both are really good. Both are pretty nice. So that's what to do if black decides to castle after playing bishop f4. So that's what you want to do if you play bishop f4. But I actually prefer the move bishop g5. Now, bishop g5 is more common. Once again, you're probably going to see black just castle here, and then probably just play something like e3, and then h6. Probably going to want to just slide the bishop back, and this is a position I'm quite fond of for white. And so that's what to do if you play bishop g5. Just simply, after you see castles or something like that, just go e3, then go h6, move the bishop back, not like that, and then you're just going to be in a nice position. So that's what you do if you see bishop e7. But you can also see the move knight b d7. Now, if you see knight b d7, my personal favorite move here is just bishop g5, putting a pin on this knight, putting some pressure on the knight. Nothing crazy. There's a lot of lines here, and a lot more obscure lines, so we're not going to go into too much detail. So just to recap, if you see bishop e7, or if you see knight b d7, I would just recommend to move g5, or if you see bishop e7, you can also go bishop f4. Now another move black can play is c5, and if we see c5, we're just simply going to play c takes c5 here. There's a lot of moves. The best one is c takes d4, but you got to be a bit careful here because queen takes c4, you're probably going to see e takes d4, and we're going to play a little bit of a trap here. We'll play bishop g5, and the idea is, looking at the opening base, the most common move is knight c6, but this is actually a bad move because we get this cool tactic, bishop takes f6. And what we're basically doing is we're allowing black to take our queen. We're going to take black's queen. They're going to take our knight with check most of the time. Then if we take the knight, king takes, all of a sudden we have a much better position. So that's what to do if they take you on c takes d4. But they don't have to play that. They can also play e takes d5. If you see e takes d5, once again, bishop g5, best move here. You're going to see that another reoccurring theme, this idea of placing the bishop here, and like this development of the pieces on the same squares. That's what's nice about d4, is a lot of similar ideas. Now, what if, though, they play knight takes d5? Well, then we're going to play e4. You'll probably see something like knight takes c3, and if you do that, b takes c3. You'll probably see c takes c4, c takes c4, and in this position, white just has a really nice center control. And so it's just much better for white here. Not significantly, but it's pretty decently good for white. So that's what to do if black plays c5. Now another move you can see black play here is bishop b4. Now if bishop b4, a move you can play is e3. I'm not too fond of this move, but it's not terrible. I'm not too fond of this move mainly because after castles and bishop d3, it's not insanely good for, it's about equal, but I much prefer some other moves you can play here. If you do play e3, you also have the chance of bishop takes knight check. If you see that, then just simply take with the pawn here. And after black castles, it's pretty common. White's just much better here, just because you have the bishop pair, which is a bit better, and you have a little bit more center control. So just to recap, when you see bishop b4, you can play e3, but the move, my favorite move, is bishop g5. Now, castling is almost the most common move here, and if you do that, just simply play e3. You may see h6 and just slide your bishop over to h4, and this is just a position I'm really fond of. I feel like it's about equal, but it's a really nice position in my opinion. You can also play c takes d5. Now, black will almost always take back with the e-pawn, and then I would just simply go bishop g5. And honestly, I kind of like this position, but I just would much prefer going bishop g5 straight away. So that's what to do if you see bishop b4. Another move you may see is d takes c4. If you see that, there's a couple moves you can play here. You can go e4, and the line goes like you'll probably see bishop b4, bishop g5, then you'll see maybe even a c5. They can play stuff like e5 or bishop takes c4. Stuff like that's pretty common. You can also go instead queen a4 check. Probably see something like c6, and if you see that, queen takes c4 is pretty decent. Now you may see b5. If this happens, just move your queen over to b3 and it's fine. And, you know, that's another option you have here. You can also just simply go e3, and then you'll probably see something like c5, and if you see c5, just simply capture this pawn, and it's about equal. But you don't always actually have to go knight f3 here. You can also go straight away to bishop g5. If you see this, most common move you're going to see is like bishop e7. If this happens, you're probably just going to want to go e3. Black will probably castle, and then knight f3. And this is pretty nice. This may look a bit familiar. This is what is called a transposed opening. It's when you get the same position, but the move order is a bit different. And that's something you'll probably see a lot in d4 openings. Specifically, stuff like this, where black and white are putting the pieces all on similar squares. If bishop g5, some other stuff you'll see is knight bd7. If you see this, just simply go e3. You're probably going to see c6. Then you'll probably just want to play knight f3. And then you may see something like queen a5. You can also see, instead of knight bd7, you can also see c6. And if this gets played, do the same thing, e3. Black's often going to just transpose into the same opening with knight bd7. Then you go knight f3, and you may see queen a5. And then here you got two responses. You can take the pawn, or you can play knight d2. Both are decent. Another opening you can see here is c6. If you see c6, there's a couple of moves you can play. The one I would recommend the most is knight f3. And then there's a couple moves here. If you see knight f6, just go bishop g5, like always. But you can also see d takes c4. And if that happens, there's a couple of moves you can play. You can go e3, you can go e4. And if you see e4, you may see something like bishop e4. Just simply take the pawn here, and white's significantly better. So bishop e4 is not the greatest move. But if you see knight f6, then again, just bishop takes c4, and white is just significantly better here. Just simply, they're up a pawn. Black doesn't really have any counterplay. So that's what you can do if you see c6 get played. Another move you can see is just c5. This is a Tarish defense. I would just recommend c takes c5 here. And if e takes c5, you can go knight f3. And then you'll probably see something like knight c6. If you play d takes c4 here, white's just significantly better in my opinion. I really like white's position here. You can also go e3 or g3 though. Those are both theory. So that's what to do if you see c5. And then something else you can see, if you go knight c3, you can see bishop e7. And if you remember, we're talking about transposing openings. What we would do here is simply just go knight f3. And you're probably going to see something like knight f6. And this may look pretty familiar once we go bishop g5 here. And this is just a transposed variation that we've already gone over. Also, black may go straight for bishop e4 instead of developing a knight first. If you do that, again, knight f3 is not half bad. If you see knight f6, then bishop g5, and this should look pretty familiar. So, overall, just to recap, when e6, always go knight c3 here. If you see bishop b4, bishop e7, knight f6, I would just simply go knight f3 here. If c6, again, knight f3 isn't that bad as well. And if knight f6, you can go knight f3 here. A lot of moves. You can see bishop e7, bishop e4, c6, c5, stuff like that, knight b d7. And in most openings, just go g5 and you're in a good position. Anyway, hopefully that's helpful. Next time we'll be talking about what would happen if instead of declining it with the Queen's Gambit declined, we see the Slav defense. And then we also may talk about what would happen if black accepts the Gambit. Hopefully you found this helpful, and thank you for watching.